It's that read it before it happens. All right. Hey, Jason. All right. So I want to talk today about creating accessible documents, but specifically in Google Docs. And let me do this. Share the whole screen. So the first thing is, so I'm Casey Raymond. I'm a white middle-aged male with glasses, and I want to talk today about creating accessible Google Docs. And get a few things cleared out here. I'll periodically pop into the chat to keep track of that. And during this workshop, I want to start by going through some information and then open a Google Doc and kind of walk through how to do the various items and steps to create something that's accessible. And this really deals with our 5 basic principles of accessibility that we've talked about over and over and over and over, which are identify your content types, provide text equivalents, use color carefully, provide descriptive hyperlinks, and use clear language, use plain language. All right. And as we go through the document as an example, we'll show how all of these work and how all of these relate. But let's look at some things in general. We don't often say this, but it's really important, right? Digital documents are different than print documents. And just getting that realization through can really change how you approach creating a digital document. If it's something that's designed to be viewed just in a digital format, right? There's a lot of things you can do that you can't do in print. There's also no reason to make it look a specific way, right? We have lots of experience with print documents, and we want things to look a certain way once it's printed out. That's not necessarily valid, or needed in a digital setting, right? So one of the things you really want to do is shift your thought process in creating a digital document. And just so that folks in Zoom have this, I'm going to drop in the chat the link to the slide deck if you want that to go along. I'll make sure everybody has it by the end as well. So the first principle, identify structure types, it really is using structured content, right? Using headings, right? Using styles. And I'll show you how that works. In Google Docs, there's a style called title. Don't use it. Right? Similarly, in Word, I think there's one called title. Don't use it. In accessibility world, title really is related to the title of a document, right? Or a chapter, of a big book. And so from an accessibility standpoint, we don't use those very often. If you really, want that first heading title of your document, use heading 1. And you have to have a heading 1 before you can have a heading 2, and a heading 2 before you can have a heading 3. Those of you that might remember doing outlines, right? You had to have an A before you could have a B and so forth. Same basic idea. If you want to present a list of information, make sure you identify it as a list. And there's a couple different kinds of lists. If the order is really relevant, make it a numbered list. If the order isn't relevant, it can just be a bulleted list. And I've also added here don't add extra returns just to create white space. Right? I'll show you how you can format that within the style. As well as if you really want to start a new page, there's ways to do that without just hitting a whole bunch of returns to get to a new page. Some assistive technology and adaptive technology will need to step through every single one of those returns instead of just jumping to the next block of content. This is kind of an example of where you might want it to look a certain way if it's printed, but it doesn't have to be that way digitally. Text equivalence. Okay. Any item that you add to your document that isn't text needs to be described. Okay. And the way to think about this is what would happen if the document was read aloud to someone? What would get said about that particular item that's not text? And related, doesn't matter if it gets skipped. If it really doesn't matter, it's just there to make it look nice. It's a decorative image, and you can identify it as such, that it's decorative. But this is always a place where I say, this is an opportunity to stop and think about why I'm putting this item in the document. What is it providing? What is its purpose? And if it's not just decorative, then, and it has a reason for being there, one, you should be able to describe it to someone. You know, think about how you would describe it in a radio interview. But two, it needs to be talked about somewhere in the text. Okay. So, are there complications here? Absolutely. There's some discipline-specific situations where, honestly, there isn't a good, clear text equivalent. Chemistry happens to be one of those. So here's an example of some text equivalents. Right? One's an equation, one's a graph. I'm going to pop back out so that we can actually kind of look at what you might say. So in the case of this graph, I put in the description, it's a plot of y values versus x from 22 to 33. The y values fit the equation. It tells the user or whatever technology what that actually is. Okay. Math equations, a little different, but we have a campus license for math type. It works within all the Google platform. It's just a graphical equation editor. And I'll show you an example of it when we do our example. But the real benefit is it creates the text equivalent for you, which is what all this coding is over here in this description box. And I'm not saying you have to learn how to program that, because it's just a graphical equation editor. You create the equation, it does the coding that assistive technologies can take advantage of. Using the right colors is really important for all users. And it's a matter of thinking about, if you have multiple colors, how do those two colors relate to each other, as well as a contrast. We've probably all seen situations where you've got a slide background and the text color, and they're pretty close, and it's kind of hard to read. I'll show you the tools to avoid that. But I want to show you a couple examples of what I would say poor use of color. So here's a graph. I've got a green line and a red line. Now, for some users, they're not going to pick up the green and the red, and it's going to look like this. Sure, these two have slightly different shades of gray, maybe. The other point of color is, do not use it exclusively to distinguish differences, right? These are both solid lines, right? What would be better is for one of these to be solid and one of these to be dashed. And then it doesn't matter whether someone is seeing it in grayscale, whether someone's seeing it with color. There is a distinction. We'll come back to that one as well. So how do you know what colors to use or not? There's two tools that are really, really helpful. You don't need both of them, but you may find both of them helpful. The first one is Color Contrast Analyzer. This is a piece of software you'll have to get installed on your computer. And I realized this morning, I don't think this is part of the campus image, and it probably should be. But you can go to this and if on your own computer, at least download it. The advantage of Color Contrast Analyzer is that it allows you to put an eyedropper on any color on the screen and find out what that color is. WebAIM's Contrast Checker is just a web resource that allows you to look at how various colors work relative to each other. And it gives you this contrast ratio and tells you whether it's going to pass accessibility standards or not. The larger the text is, the smaller the ratio needs to be. So this would work for one standard, but fail for 3 of them. And the nice thing with this is I can pick and choose any color I want. Right? The RGB values here aren't necessarily as helpful. What you're actually often going to see are the hex code numbers, right? You don't memorize these. They are just what they are. Right? But I can pick a color and it gives me a contrast which isn't very good, right? I can make it even worse. And you can see an example of this teal on gray just doesn't function. Black on white works pretty well. The red and green, kind of that I had in my plot, right? I mean, you could kind of see there was a difference, but their contrast is horrible. And that's also a clue that if you flip it to grayscale, it's not going to work. One of the things as well, I mean, this red is kind of the typical default red that most software has, right? It's okay in most cases on a white background. But notice how quickly it fails going to a darker background. That means if you have that red near black text, it might not be apparent that it's a different color, right? So this tool allows you to kind of figure it out. And if you know this hex code, you can use that to set your color in Google Doc or whatever software you're using. It's just we don't think about these hex codes for colors very often. Descriptive hyperlinks. Right? Make sure that if you're going to put a link in the document, it really is clear where that link is taking you. We often see, click here. Okay, where is that going to take me? And this is another case where we're looking at the difference between digital and print. If it's something that's printed out, it's very likely the user is going to have to hand type the address. Well, then you have to show it. But if it's a digital thing, they're going to click on it. you don't have to show the whole address. It's just an active link, right? So before we get then jumping into example document to walk through, we have access to DQ University, and there's some very good tutorials there for document creation. There's a set of them just for Microsoft. There's a set of them just for the Google Suite. But Kate DeForest also created a pretty extensive set of tutorials on our accessibility page. So if you go to the digital accessibility page, the written and video tutorials, it's broken out in documents and slides and various applications. So here's the Google Doc set. There's a video going through the items. There's also the written steps for the tutorial, okay? There's a chance in some of these cases, particularly the Microsoft versions, are a little bit different than what you might be using. But this is here as a resource as well, that you might take advantage of. And now, let's go through an example. And so I have this document, an example of gibberish, which I've used for classes. And so there's a link here. You can click on the link. It'll make you create your own copy of it. And so here's what the document looks like. Okay. It's a bunch of just filler text with some things highlighted. I've highlighted areas as guidance to students or others of things that probably need styles. One of the first things that you probably want to do if you're starting from scratch or you're starting from a document, you're like, is if somebody did apply some styles, but not all, you might just select everything and then go in Google Docs, format, clear formatting. This will strip out all the formatting. Right? I'm not going to do it because I want to keep my highlighting. And I know everything else in the document is basically styled as normal text. But getting rid of all the formatting sometimes is just an easier way to get started. And the styles we're talking about in Google Doc are right here in the menu bar. And so we've got normal text. We have title, which I said don't use. Okay. Subtitle, you might find a use for here or there. I've at times used this to denote figure captions, if you're doing that. And then we have heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and so forth. If you add a heading 3, heading 4 will appear in the list. I think you can have up to 9 levels of headings. I think it's really rare to use more than 3. All right. So one of the first things is let's go through and kind of do things as heading. And the title of this document, the very first thing is probably our heading level 1. So I go up to the styles, I come down to heading level 1, and I just say apply. If you like keyboard shortcuts, there are keyboard shortcuts given for most of these. So like to apply heading level 1, Control, Alt, and 1 will do that. And I'm just going to apply it. And notice the text all changed. And I've got a link here, which I probably don't want. Right? This is just the link to what is gibberish. And so the way to make a descriptive hyperlink is to highlight what you want. You can right click and do insert link or Control K. Okay. You can also get to it from insert, the insert menu, and link. And then we just paste in what the link is. Right? And it's just there then. And it's formatted to indicate that it is indeed a link. Right? I've got an introduction, which probably is going to be a heading 2. I can scroll down a little bit farther. I've got another heading level 2. Probably another heading level 2. Now I've got a list. And just from the nature of the way this list is written, do this first, this happens second. The order is important. And so I can just highlight this whole list. And you might have to use the little dots to get expanded, but I can pull down a numbered list. Right. I'm going to get rid of my highlighting. And so now that's all formatted, set as a numbered list. I can change the kind of numbering that happens, right? Whether I do number 1, and if I indented something, A, B, right? Or if I want letters, or I want Roman numerals, there's ways automatically to reset stuff. Likewise, if we wanted to indent, these were sub lists, I just hit a tab and it takes care of it for me. All right. And if you're like, oh, I didn't want to do that, you decrease the indent. This little button here pops it back over into my list. All right. I'm using keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to make this a heading level 3. This is heading level 3. Add a 2. Add a 2. So I've just gone down through and taken care of all of those headings, right, that I suspect I have. Okay. One of the ways you can kind of see if you've done this right is you can look at the outline view, this little sidebar button. And now it shows me what I've identified as headings. And so heading 1, and then I've got 4 things that are heading level 2, and then I have the indents for heading level 3. This is where working with a long document, headings are helpful, because I can click on any one of these and it takes me exactly to that spot in the document. Right? Without having to, where is that, and scroll around, I can get to any point in the document. Now, let's say this is not the way I want this text to look. Right? So I can select that, I can change it. I can change basically every aspect about it. All right. The key thing is that has overridden the style. But if you want that's the way to everything to look, I'm going to come up here, heading 2, and now instead of applying, I'm going to say update heading 2 to match what I have picked. And when I do that, notice everything that was tagged heading 2 changed. I don't have to go through the document and find every place. It automatically updated because it's based on the style. Likewise, we talked a little bit about spacing. So I can go here, line and paragraph spacing, and I'm going to click on custom spacing. And so right now, the text is going to be separated lines by 1.15. I can make it double spaced. But I can also tell it how much space to put before the heading and how much space to put after the heading. And so right now I've got 18 before and 6 after. If I change this 6, I'm going to go, I don't know, make it really big, 36. And all of a sudden, right, for this one, it put it in. Again, I manually set what I wanted. I need to go back and say, match it to the heading. And now I have that big gap everywhere. Okay, so styles are really nice to be able to change format for the whole thing quickly. But if I change my normal text and I change this spacing, I want it to be double, and I go and apply that, the whole document now is double spaced. Everywhere there was normal text, it became double spaced. Right. So this is how styles function and styles work. Right. I want to pop over and see. I got a chat. Is there a recommended font for accessibility? There are some recommended typefaces. I won't get them all off the top of my head, but Georgia is a very good typeface for accessibility in the screen, which is what I'm using here. It's a serif typeface. Another option is Verdana for a sans serif typeface. I think Source Sans is supposed to be pretty reasonable. I'll go and find the list that's out there. But there are some options. Georgia and Verdana were kind of designed for the screen and are pretty universal across every application.
How is Arial?
Arial's okay. I know it's the default, but the defaults aren't always the best. All right, back to my list. So we've talked about headings. We've talked about how to change the style for the heading, whether it's change the color. And I said we can do any color. Well, I can pick it on this grid, but if I click custom, it gives me the ability to put in the hex code. So I could put in the hex code and say, there you go. Right. So you can use the contrast checker to figure out what two colors work well together and then use that to plug them in. All right. Questions with the styles. All right. There's another benefit of styles I'll show you shortly. But you might have noticed there's a place I say add an equation here. And I set it off with a whole bunch of extra spaces just to make sure it was set off. I'm going to delete those extra carriage returns and extensions, math type. You might need to allow it access. It takes a minute to load. It comes out, if you want to write a chemical reaction, chem type works, but we're going to do math equation. Okay. So it opens an equation in it that's graphical. And so, right, I can click here to get squared. I can do fractions. Right now, this defaults to being automatic italic. If you don't want it italic, you can take that off. You can change the typeface a little bit, right? We can change the size. And as you can see across the top, there are lots of math options, right? And we just do insert. And so now I have the equation there. And the nice thing is when I go and look at its alt text, its text equivalence, it's all done for me. I don't have to do that coding and programming. Graph. Graph should look familiar. It's the one from the slideshow, but now I'm not using color only to distinguish between the two different lines. I've got a solid green line and I have a dashed red line. Right? And I have a graph of two quadratic functions. I probably really should say that what the green solid line is and the red dashed line is, whatever. Describe the image. So that any assistive technology can make it clear what that image is. If you happen to be in your car and you don't have CarPlay where you can just see it on your screen and it needs to tell you what it is, it can. I know you sometimes want things to show up at different places or start a new page, right? Don't just add a bunch of returns. Use a page break, right? If you want it to really break, right? You can also do section breaks. Section breaks can be helpful if you really need to sort of break your document apart into chunks, right? Or you want a big change in formatting from one section to the next. This is really a situation of a really long document, okay? Sections can allow you to change the way pages get numbered. Small, lowercase Roman numerals versus Arabic numerals. But if it's just a matter of, I want to start at a clean page, put in a page break. Because that will be very clean and it's not just a whole bunch of carriage returns. Right. Now, one thing that I haven't touched on, and I'm not going to touch on in this session, right? Tables. There are appropriate uses of tables, specifically to show numerical information. Don't use a table just to make things look the way you want it. I know it's common. I really want these two things to be side by side in two columns. If you really need things and want things to be side by side in two columns, then we can select the information we want to be in two columns. And in format, we can say we want it in two columns. Right? And it will do that for us. And this is also where then I can insert a column break if I want the two paragraphs to start at the top of each column, right? So if you have a reason to show things side by side, use columns. Again, this is a mental shift between making something look good when you print it out compared to using it in a digital format, all right? If you need to do tables, there's ways to do tables. But we tend to treat that as a level up because they just aren't used that often or aren't needed that often. All right. So one of the other things I wanted to show folks with styles, and I've got my title up there. I'm going to insert a page break. And I'm going to do a table of contents. So insert table of contents. Right? There's some options of what it's going to look like. Right? Because I use styles, it automatically generates the table of contents with the right page numbers. And if I needed to rearrange this and I added some page breaks or added some more text, right, it will update the table of contents automatically for you. Right? So, side benefit of using styles. It's not just an accessibility thing, it actually makes some of your life easier down the road, especially with larger documents. Right? The last part of creating an accessible document within Google Docs is to go to extensions and launch Grackle. Right? Again, like MathType, you might have to give it permission, but Grackle is an accessibility checker. And so we'll get it started. It's going to run along here, do its thing. And notice the very first item it checks, it gave me an error. This is going to be pretty much universal that the document title isn't going to be known. Right? We want it just to use the Google Doc name. Right? So we select that, and that will resolve the issue about there not being a title. Okay, but we go down through, right, giving me, wait, some headings are suspiciously empty. Oh, where'd I can click on this and it'll take me to. So I've got a heading here that doesn't have anything in it. I'll get rid of it. An extra return. Telling me paragraphs with heading styles and where they are. Headers and footers. Sometimes you want header or footer information. Sometimes it's really not necessary. It gives me a little warning that there's not anything there. Okay. We got good color contrast. It might come up saying, I'm not sure, you need to check it. Okay. But Grackle is a really good way to ensure that your document's fairly accessible. Can't make it perfect, but it gets you a lot of the way there. The last part of Grackle that I wanted to show you is, notice there's a button for export to PDF. Exporting your PDF from Grackle gives you a greater likelihood the PDF is accessible than if you just download from Google as a PDF. This export to PDF from Grackle works better than if I just go to File, Download as a PDF. It's just how the information gets handled and coded and passed through to the PDF. However, you don't need to make it a PDF, don't make it a PDF. It's better just to provide access to the source document. And I realize that there's this idea, well, but it can be changed. Well, Google Docs, you can just give them people view permission. They can't edit it. They might be able to copy it and change it, but it's not changed in the original, right? If they are changing it, there will be a history log of changing it. So it's better just to provide access to the source document and from an accessibility standpoint, right? So that was my list. That was my examples. I know I still have to go double check typeface options. Questions. Does that make sense? How to create a more accessible document within Google Docs. And a big part of it is just using the styles. And that's a habit shift. We often just create a document and just start typing and, oh yeah, I want this bold and I want this bigger. Use the styles.
And ask if there's a spelling error.
Grackle will not catch it. You have to rely on Google, kind of like I've got the one here. So Grackle is really an accessibility checker. It's looking to see that the document's going to work with various assistive and adaptive technologies.
You were right, Casey. After I added the styles to my document, he's now accessible.
Yeah, we often say this, that there's a few little things that you can do or incorporate into your habits that go a long way to making your documents more accessible. And it is a little bit of a shift in mindset and focus, but it definitely works. Now I'm curious about where the accessible typefaces are, and I can't think right now off the top of my head where I saw that list. But I can let everybody know. All right. Other questions? I will say that the process is basically the same in Word. It's just a matter of finding the styles pane and the formatting, right? And it'll create the table of contents, so on and so forth. It's the same principles all the way through. Allison.
So I have a question about making columns. I have something on my document that I tabbed over to sort of make another column. It's not saying it's inaccessible, but when I tried to add columns, it like didn't look the way I wanted it to look. So how do you do that from the start?
Yeah, so columns, I'm going to take these two paragraphs and I'm going to do format. I'm going to make them columns. And one of the tricky parts with columns is that if you think of the text as a string, it goes all the way down the first column and then it strings to the second. And does it carry over onto another page or not? But if you really need the information to look the same on both, your instinct is I'm just going to hit enter a whole bunch of times to separate it. Don't do that. Go to where you want the text to start at the next column and do an insert column break. Okay. And so now I've got this set of text gone right to this new column. I will say very plainly that working with things in columns, especially if the whole document isn't columns, can get very tricky, especially if you want column 1 to align with column 2. And my question to anyone in that situation is always, why are you doing it that way? And often the answer is, well, I think it looks really good. And that's a print mentality. A common example of this and table usage to lay things out is on a syllabus, a schedule. Week 1, we do these things. Week 2, week 3. I've generally shifted to doing a list and then putting stuff in that particular list item. And you can do sub lists within it. to keep it organized from week 1 to week 15 without forcing it into a column format. But we can look at your specific example and kind of see what's what. But I will say, working with columns can get really tricky if you want it to look a specific way. And then I always ask, why does it need to look that way? And if the answer is, oh, I think it looks pretty, then there might be a better way to do it from accessibility. Yeah, so this is one of the discipline-specific areas. Music's another one. What's the text equivalence for music? In the case of paintings, I understand you might put an image of a painting in a document, right? And you've got a reason for putting it there. You're going to write about why it's there. But it also means you're using it to highlight something very specific. And so besides identifying what the artwork is, you probably in your text equivalent should indicate the specific aspects of the artwork that you want people to know about, right? In this particular painting, the use of color in the upper left corner demonstrates whatever. So you really want to describe the image and what's important about that image in the text equivalent. It's maybe redundant to what you have in the prose of the document as well, but at least it's there for any assistance to make it clear. Does that help, Lynn? All right, so hopefully folks can start making some small habit changes and have some accessible documents or more accessible documents going forward. All right. Share. Going to get to the recording button.